In today's world, risk doesn't announce itself. It hides in plain sight. That's where Brosnan Consulting Services comes in. Founded by industry veteran Patrick J. Brosnan, we provide risk advisory and protective intelligence solutions for individuals, corporations, and institutions that can't afford uncertainty. From due diligence and investigative consulting to strategic intelligence and protection planning, we help you see threats before they become problems. When experience matters and discretion is essential, trust Brosnan Consulting Services. Visit brosnaninvestigative.com to learn more.
Welcome back, folks. Pat Brosnan, live from the Batcave. I'm here with retired NYPD lieutenant and Finest Unfiltered. That's a podcast. That's extraordinary. We're going to talk about that later. But right now, John Macari was just taking me through some of the issues he had with and his unflaggable opposition to the mandatory COVID vaccine. And I want to go back, John, a little bit in time from when you were in anti-crime and field intelligence. What's the real story, in your view, on crime trends today in New York City? What the mainstream media and the city politicians aren't telling the public. And I know you're plugged in all the way to the Prince of Darkness. You have a tremendous following. You get inside baseball. You get the skinny from the boots on the ground. Let us know, brother. What's
Yeah,
the
absolutely. I stepped into policing and, when I was a kid, New York City was completely different. New York City was a city of crime. The mafia controlled my neighborhood, not the New York City Police Department, and I watched 42nd Street transform overnight from, hookers standing around with, with scenes that you would see in movies and late 70s movies and early 80s movies to like literally Disney World. So you could walk around any neighborhood in New York City, not get into a confrontational fight, not worried about being robbed or mugged or shot. And so when I came on the NYPD, New York City was becoming its safest version that it's ever been. It became the safest big city in the world. I came on post 9/11. We were loved. We were lauded, cops, firemen. And I watched from 2013 when Bill de Blasio stepped in, us to take a step back. I was trained in the broken windows theory of policing. I watched firsthand us transform neighborhoods. We were still transforming neighborhoods, cleaning neighborhoods up. Like from the time when Giuliani stepped in, we were still doing that in the early 2000s, all the way to the mid 2000s. But when de Blasio came in, we went away from that. We went away from that and we went away from proactive policing and we went to more reactionary policing, where instead of preventing the crimes before they happened, we're going up to the crimes after and picking up the policing. So today we're being told that the NYPD is at historic lows in crime's down. But if you listen to what they're talking about, if you really hone in on what they're doing, they're running a public relations campaign. Now, it's true that the crime numbers aren't what they were when you were a cop in the 80s and the 90s and the 70s. The crime numbers were tremendous. But it's also true that the crime numbers are growing, and they're growing since pre-pandemic levels. They're starting to skyrocket in everywhere, in violent crime and robberies and all major crime, including shootings and murders. And they're not telling you that. What they're doing now, if you listen to what the NYPD tells you, is they're telling you we're at historic lows. But if you ask for what the period is, and if you look at it, they're comparing crime drops to the pandemic years only. So they're saying, oh, this was the biggest drop we've ever had in the history of New York City in the police department. But if you go back to just 2019 and you compare the crime numbers of today to 2019, you'll see that overall crime's up 30%, felony assaults up 44%. And so that's what's happening right now. That's why you're hearing the businesses, the people traveling to and from New York City, and the people that live in New York City saying, I don't feel safe. But what the New York City Police Department is telling you, that's your perception versus the reality. This is social media telling you this. They're telling you, don't believe your own eyes. They're lying to you. And it's a public safety, public relations campaign that's being ran in every major Democratic city throughout this country. Baltimore saying the same line. DC's telling you it. LA, Miami, And any big city, Chicago, they're all telling you crime's down, everything's perception versus reality. We're safer now than we ever been. We're making history, and it's a complete lie.
Couldn't agree more. It's the legacy and traditional manipulation of the numbers, and particularly against a context that's not historically accurate. Right? They're discussing during the pandemic, and that's how they're overlaying the numbers. I mean, you go through the city now, there's a lot of violence, and the shootings are way up, and the murders are up. I couldn't agree more, John. That narrative is very convenient for the NYPD and the city to espouse, but it doesn't stand up to analysis. And I think you nailed it very well. And I got to tell you, de Blasio has blood on his hands all the way up to his shoulders for what he did to the NYPD. Yeah, I mean, he was so horrific. I mean, I've said in the past, and I said it on your show, he actually made Dinkins, who was horrible, look like Winston Churchill. That's how bad he was. And I will always say the murders of Wenjin Liu and Rafael Ramos on December 22nd, 2014 were a direct result of the disgusting and reprehensible rhetoric that de Blasio was espousing throughout the city, along with eat the pigs, burn the pigs, shoot the pigs, kill the police. It's unbelievable. We can never let that go. And where's your thoughts on that, John? I know you were in the job at that time. It was a nightmare.
It was a nightmare. I think we were getting it from the federal government as well. You know, the 8 years of Obama as well, I think really started the scrutiny on law enforcement. And we really became a profession we became the target of the public. It was really bad. Not the public that we were helping, not the public that we served, but overall the media narrative of us that we were racist, we were corrupt, we were out there killing black people for no reason. And if you looked at the data, it debunked it like on its face. None of it was true. You know, they took a lot of high profile incidents and lied about them. Michael Brown incident, the Eric Garner incident, and the whole media narrative and spin were not accurate. And unfortunately, a lot of the police departments across the country, including the NYPD, went along with that narrative. They helped further that narrative, including a lot of the appointed officials. And that's the thing that people don't realize is, that there are guys that had great careers in the NYPD, but once you become into appointed 3-star chief, you're really tied to that mayor. You're tied to whatever the politics of that mayor is. So a lot of these guys aligned themselves with a Bill de Blasio, with a Eric Adams, and they spun the same narratives that was in the media. And to me, they're no longer cops, even though they wear a uniform. They're politicians. They're politically appointed managers in my position. A lot of people get upset when I say that, but it's just the truth of it.
John, during the madness that followed the George Floyd matter, we saw that brass chiefs in the NYPD took a knee with probability. I'd like you to give me the odds of someone like yourself ever taking a knee, with 0 being never in 1,000 centuries and 100 being I'd take a knee. How where do you stand on that, John? Although I already know, but I think our listeners have to understand how horrific and disgusting and reprehensible that behavior was, and it can't be forgotten.
It was absolutely disgusting, Pat. And I was out there those nights, and in the early nights right after that, the riots happening across New York City. Some protests, mainly a lot of them were riots that the media never published. And I watched the police department fundamentally change how they deal with moments of civil unrest, to where I was told as a lieutenant that I cannot take any independent action. I have to wait for legal. I have to wait for 6 months, a kid on the job for 6 months who's an attorney, who doesn't know anything about New York City streets, who probably didn't even grow up in New York City, to tell me when I need to arrest somebody. And there were chiefs and there were inspectors going, listen, if we got to kneel, we're going to kneel. And I told the chief in Manhattan South, he said, the only way that I'm going to kneel is if I'm dead and there's no soul in my body, and you prop my dead body up there with no soul in it, because it's not happening. So, and don't ask me to do it.
Couldn't agree more. The only way a guy like you or me would heal ever, Neil, would be if they put 10 rounds into us and we fell to our knees dead. That's the only possible scenario. And it was so beyond horrific to think that that was what went on in the city of New York when 1,000 businesses were burned to the ground. Over 400 officers went to the hospital. My understanding is hundreds of police vehicles were lit on fire. All my time in the 4-6, which was a madhouse, I never once saw a radio car or a van on fire. Never once. And to think that hundreds, that was a period that was such a dark, dark time for the city of New York and New York's finest. And it's fantastic that we're coming out of it, even though the shootings are up and robberies are up and murders are up. But at least we've gone past that. But ma'am, Danny is a rattlesnake. He worries me tremendously. So we don't know what's coming next. But what I'd like to do, John, is we're coming up on a break. We're going to go to an ad. I want to come back and I want to discuss what you founded, the Finest Unfiltered, an amazing podcast that finally gives the rank and file cops a voice. So, folks, stay tuned. It's Pat Brosnan live from the Batcave. I'm here with retired Lieutenant John Macari, and we'll be right back.
When the storm hits or when your trees need serious care, you call O'Sullivan Tree Care. O'Sullivan Tree Care is a fully licensed and insured family-owned company, proudly serving Rockland County, Westchester County, and New Jersey. Their experienced team handles it all: tree removals, precision pruning, stump grinding, crane work, and emergency storm cleanup. Fast, safe, and professional. When severe weather strikes, O'Sullivan Tree Care responds when it matters most, clearing dangerous trees, restoring access, and protecting homes and properties. They also supply high-quality mulch and screen topsoil available for pickup or delivery. You call, they haul. What sets O'Sullivan Tree Care apart is reliability under pressure. When others step back, their crew steps forward. Experienced, equipped, and ready to work in the toughest conditions. So whether you're dealing with storm damage, downed trees, or routine property maintenance, make the call to the team you can trust. O'Sullivan Tree Care, 845-359-8733. That's 845-359-8733. O'Sullivan Tree Care, where quality meets reliability and the job gets done right.
Okay, folks, we're back. This is the Batcave with Pat Brosnan, and I'm here with a very special guest, none other than retired NYPD Lieutenant John Macari, and also the founder, he is, of the Finest Unfiltered, a podcast that gives the rank and file cops finally a voice. So, John, what inspired you to go public on the podcast, and what do you hope everyday New Yorkers hear that they're not getting anywhere else but when they tune into the Finest Unfiltered, which, by the way, I happen to love?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, look, so it was a bad time during COVID. I wanted really to get my voice out there, what was happening in the politics in New York City, how it was affecting the police department, what I thought was going to happen to the profession, and how I believed there was going to be a mass exodus out of the NYPD, and that ultimately that was going to lead to a spike in crime, lower quality of life for New York City residents, businesses fleeing. And so I got out on social media. I was the first person in the NYPD to be denied and had my back put up against the wall that they were going to terminate me. They were going to terminate me for not taking the vaccine. So I went out on social media. I had the opportunity to go out on major media and discuss what happened to me on Fox, on Newsmax, on many other podcasts and many other radio stations. And, you know, there came a time when the exodus started happening just a few months later, and then that was all over the news. And then, you know, a lot of major media was reaching out to me at that time to speak about woke DAs like Alvin Bragg or people across the country. And so I was going on doing these hits, these media hits, to just try to educate the public about what was happening, also trying to advocate to end this mandate. So, because I ultimately wanted to go back to work. You know, that was ultimately, I didn't want to stay retired. I wanted to go back, you know. And so I figured if I could advocate, if I could go out there, use my own name and my own voice, because, you know, as cops, we're treated like children. We're supposed to be seen and not heard. And I said, you know what? I'm done not being seen and not heard. Now I'm going to be seen and heard. I'm going to use my own name. You know, I'm a child of the city. I'm a son of Brooklyn. I'm a son of Staten Island. You know, my mother was a school crossing guard. My father was a Vietnam veteran. I got nothing to be ashamed about. I'm proud of my service, and these are my opinions, and people should know them. So I went out on social media, and then came time to talk about the exodus, and there were major media stations that did not want me to bring up the mandate. So I decided that I needed to start my own platform where I could actually speak. And my social media, although it's not large, it has a lot of reach. There's a lot of big people that follow my account. All major media follows my account, and a lot of big names and a lot of people that are in the know follow me. And like it gets sent around throughout the men and women in the New York City Police Department, right? They take pictures of it. It's in group chats. Maybe they're not retweeting it or resharing it. So I started the podcast myself. We started just as an audio podcast, and it was pretty popular right away. We had about 1,000 downloads almost right away. I didn't know anything about the space. I just wanted to have real conversations. So in the early days, it was just me having interviews with cops who were either forced out or what happened. Anyway, my partner now, Eric Dim, who co-hosts with me, he had called me and he goes, "Look, they're trying to fire me. I became the New York City's most complained about cop, and I love what you're doing, and I'd love to join you, and I'd love for you to interview me so I could tell my story." And I said, "Yeah, no problem." So he came on. I interviewed him. I think it was about 16 episodes in, and then we started to grow. We started to do the YouTube channel, and we're just two dumb cops. We don't really know anything about media or how social media or how this works. Kind of still out there learning, but it's been pretty powerful. It's helped a lot. I think we do a lot of free consulting for the unions and for politicians too. There's a lot of people I owe invoices to, but it's been real positive. Been a real positive voice, and I know for a fact we've strengthened community relations between cops and the community, as well as we saved a lot of cops' lives. So, it's something I'm very proud of. It's a labor of love, and we're growing, and I thank God for it. I give all the blessings to God for it.
Oh, hey, when I salute you, John, what you've done is very, very important. I happen to be a huge fan. You're a humble guy. When you say you're not a big presence, you are a big presence, and the numbers support it. And it's beyond the number. The numbers are metrics. It's the reach, as you referenced, and believe that I know that the impact that your podcast has on the thousands of officers, the tens of thousands that listen in and that are influenced by it and that are informed by it and that are supported by your podcast has, without a doubt, as you mentioned very briefly and humbly, saved lives. I have no question about it. We both know way too many officers who've taken their lives. And that is something that comes, sadly, with the service, right? It probably much more so than most professions. But I think you should absolutely take a bow for that, if for nothing else. And that is a fact. And I know it to be a fact. But tell me, John, how is, say, the national conversation around law enforcement shifted since you left the department? And what do the cops still on the job today wish that the public understood?
Honestly, the weak leadership. Today, although there's a focus on law enforcement nationally now with Trump being in office, and he's a big supporter of law enforcement, and the federal agencies are now supporting law enforcement. If you look at the internal politics within each of these big blue city police departments, they're horrendous. The leadership is horrendous. They're still facing exodus after exodus. You have young guys in the profession that are just they're either leaving the profession altogether, or they already have their exit plan. Guys that should have been 30 years grow into leadership, been chiefs, kids that grew up in those neighborhoods now policing them. And you're really losing vital experience. And a lot of it has to do with the misrepresentation of crime numbers and this entire diversity, equity, inclusion movement, including the 30 for 30 movement, where we're really demonizing and a lot of people get mad at me when I say it, but it's the truth. We're demonizing white men in this profession, and we're forcing them out under these really racist, discriminatory policies that make absolutely no sense. We're being told, just for example, in New York City, we're being told that somebody like myself grew up in Brooklyn and Staten Island, that I shouldn't be policing black neighborhoods throughout New York City because I don't understand the culture. Yet those same voices on the left have no issue having someone come to this country, become a citizen within a year, and become a cop, and then police those same neighborhoods. It's a dishonest conversation, and that's what we've been trying to do on the Finest Unfiltered, not just me, all the guys on there, is really just hone in on those issues. And they're uncomfortable conversations, but we're willing to have them with everybody. We've had everybody on. I don't cut people off. We don't back people against the wall. We don't try to win conversations. We've had Mondani on. We've had anybody you could think of in opposition. We've had Cop Watch on, all of these anti-police, and we give them the floor and we try to get down to the root problems. We're not trying to win conversations, but we're trying to say exactly what's happening.
That's one of the beauties. You guys are agnostic. I mean, I follow the show closely, and that's the beauty of it, you know. But you call them out on it and the demonization, and I concur. And if you look at the legislative and political changes today in Albany and in City Hall, and the changes over the last 2 to 3 years, which policies, in your view, have done the most damage to public safety and officer morale? What do you think? And I know the diaphragm law is something that you're extremely familiar with, but take us through it.
Well, one, I would say the diaphragm law is the number one problem in New York City Police Department currently. Police officers, if they deploy basic control tactics that you would see being trained in a regular wrestling gym in high schools throughout the city, they're teaching these basic control principles of wrestling. If an officer does that, uses these same tactics, that they'll be charged with a misdemeanor. Same thing for jujitsu. You can't use the basic control principles of jujitsu. And meanwhile, we have schools that are licensed throughout all of New York City, and it's not an issue and it's not illegal for anyone to deploy these. And they're actually safe control strategies. By removing the officer's ability to compress on someone's diaphragm to use as leverage in order to get a resisting suspect handcuffed, you're basically making their force options, you're making them raise their force options. Police officers are more likely to throw closed fist strikes, things that the public don't want to see. They don't, but NYPD cops are being left with no choice. So the diaphragm law, number one, in my opinion, is that. Second to, and what New Yorkers need to pay attention to, and what I've been talking about for a while, is our protest posture. Our protest posture, if you listen to what Mondani's saying, if you listen to what Adams was saying, if you listen to even what the police commission is saying, is they're trying to decouple our counterterrorism resources out of our protest posture. That is an insane ideology. It makes absolutely no sense. The same way that we police New Year's Eve, we police the Thanksgiving Day parade. We're the number one terrorist target in the world. It's not a doubt. It's a fact. The same way that we police those and we deploy our counterterrorism resources, we should be deploying them to every mass gathering, whether it's a protest or anything else. And we've seen how that failed at the last terrorist attack that we just had weeks ago, where terrorists were able to infiltrate a protest and get off not one, but 2 IEDs. And only by the grace of God and their own incompetence did we not lose a lot of lives. The NYPD failed that day, and instead of revising their protest posture, they're doubling down on it, and they're about to go further. And it's extremely dangerous, and it's extremely dangerous not only to the cops out there, to everybody out on New York City streets. And it's something that the media is not reporting on, and it's something that we've been reporting on very heavy.
Well said. 1,000%. I couldn't have put it better. Perfectly stated. We're in an anything, everything, all the time threat environment, and they do not have the posture at the protest. And we were extraordinarily lucky, beyond comprehension, like pulling 3 Royal straight flushes when those IEDs didn't go off outside Gracie Mansion last month. So, not possibly agree more, John. And folks, we're coming up on a break. We'll be right back after this. You're here with Pat Brosnan, live from the Batcave, and I'm here with retired lieutenant and podcast The Finest Unfiltered founder John Macari. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. Don't go away.
When the storm hits or when your trees need serious care, you call O'Sullivan Tree Care. O'Sullivan Tree Care is a fully licensed and insured family-owned company, proudly serving Rockland County, Westchester County, and New Jersey. Their experienced team handles it all: tree removals, precision pruning, stump grinding, crane work, and emergency storm cleanup. Fast, safe, and professional. When severe weather strikes, O'Sullivan Tree Care responds when it matters most, clearing dangerous trees, restoring access, and protecting homes and properties. They also supply high-quality mulch and screen topsoil available available for pickup or delivery. You call, they haul. What sets O'Sullivan Tree Care apart is reliability under pressure. When others step back, their crew steps forward. Experienced, equipped, and ready to work in the toughest conditions. So whether you're dealing with storm damage, downed trees, or routine property maintenance, make the call to the team you can trust. O'Sullivan Tree Care, 845-359-8733. That's 845-359-8733. O'Sullivan Tree Care, where quality meets reliability and the job gets done right.
All right, folks, we're back. The Batcave with Pat Brosnan and retired NYPD Lieutenant John Macari. In case you're just tuning in, myself and John have been discussing the state of the city, as well as his extraordinary podcast, the Finest Unfiltered, which he does with his partner, Eric Dim. It's an extraordinary, extremely informing podcast that's needed and necessary. And we believe, and I certainly believe, that it has saved lives of officers who were on a tightrope and were entertaining thoughts of suicide, and that alone is beyond commendable. And John, as a son of Brooklyn and growing up in the city of New York and then spending almost 2 decades policing it, how has the job and the city itself evolved during your lifetime? And where do you see it heading if nothing changes?
You know, I think we learned a lot in the early days of Dinkins into Giuliani. And like I said earlier, like the city, I watched the city transform into a city of crime that was controlled by criminal organizations to a really competent, business-friendly city that brought in a lot of opportunity for kids like myself coming from the inner city. And I'm watching the politics of it revert back to that place that we came from, that we came out of. And it's really sad to watch. I think we have a really low information voting base, as well as we have a lot of apathetic voting base in New York City. And I think if nothing's done to educate the public and to get them more involved into civics and what's happening in the politics of New York City, I really think we're going to head back to that place that we were in the 70s, not only with just crime, but in the economic failures of the city. And it's I've been trying to raise the flag on this, and not just me, a lot of other people I'm involved with, a lot of other people on the Finest Unfiltered, but we're really headed for a bad place, and it's all being driven by politics. It's politics has failed us. Politics is destroying policing. It's destroying your quality of life. It's destroying your ability to earn money. It's destroying our children's future. And it's something that if we don't put the brakes on, if we don't start to identify the real factors that are happening, the real root causes of these, it's not if, but when. A lot of the things that we've become accustomed to in New York City will go away, and the biggest one being your quality of life, your ability to earn money, and the value of your property that you own there.
I think we're seeing the devolution now, John. I mean, the reality is what's old is new again, right? It's almost like a time warp. You see junkies shooting dope outside the Garden in broad daylight. You see them wandering around like zombies, just like it was in the crack days in the mid-'80s and '90s when I was running around in the South Bronx. And as a son of the Bronx myself, as you are a son of Brooklyn, it breaks my heart. It really does. I mean, the amazing work that Bill Bratton and Ray Kelly, under the leadership of Mike Bloomberg and, of course, Rudy Giuliani, the great one, being reversed. And people fail to understand, and you and I know like the back of our hands, is that the bad guys don't leave New York and go and colonize the moon. They just go dormant when crime is hot and heavy on them. That's how Rudy crushed crime under him, how he eviscerated robberies down 85%, murders down 93% over the decades. But the reality is they're still around, and that's why they start surfacing again. And as you very well know, and a lot of our listeners certainly know, is guns don't vanish either. A gun can last 100 years and still discharge a round with the same accuracy as long as you rub it with a rag with oil every couple of years, right? Still going to fire. So those guns, those bad guys, and sometimes the children of those bad guys are still there. And that's why the city can devolve so quickly, so fast, unless we keep it in a death grip. And our leadership is horrific. Ma'am Danny is the worst. He's wicked. I believe that he will be fatal for the city, fatal. And it's just starting now. He's just warming up. The guy's a wicked rattlesnake. But John, for switching gears, because we know this, but for young people listening who might be thinking about a career in law enforcement, a career in the NYPD today, what advice would you give them in today's climate?
I would listen, I never tell anyone not to take the job. I tell everybody take the job. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. It changed my life. It made a man out of me. It taught me who I am. It really forged me as a man. So I love the New York City Police Department. But the New York City Police Department that I worked in and I was trained under the broken windows theory of policing, going out there, being proactive to stop crime, you're really putting your freedom, your career, and your life on the line for a city that's telling you that they don't want you to do that type of work. They want you to be reactive. They want you to have more of a security guard mindset. They tell you we don't want warriors, we want guardians today. And although I believe that to be a wrong theory, and I don't attest to that, I think you kind of have to today because the mayor does not have your back. The police commissioner, whether it's this one or the next one, it doesn't matter. They're going to be tied to this mayor. They're not going to have your back. The city's going to turn their back on you. We've seen it over and over again. We just seen it with Sergeant Eric Duran. He's in jail for doing his job. At the same time, we're giving people lighter sentences for intentionally murdering people. Same judge let a kid off, gave him 9 months in jail for intentionally beating and murdering a homeless person, but he's giving Sergeant Duran 3 to 9 years in jail for attempting to apprehend a fleeing felon. I mean, so if that doesn't send chills down your spine, that's really the message. You have to really go along with your training, and your training is not well these days, but what they're telling you is it's proactive. I hate to say that to people, but I don't want to send somebody out and not tell them the truth of what it is. You will end up in jail if you are a proactive police officer.
It's profoundly sad to me, to you, and to guys like us who are still very proactive. But the reality is, they do want, the city government and leadership want the same model as security officers, which is detect, deter, observe, and report. None of it proactive. And you can see the results of proactive policing in the Sergeant Eric Duran matter up in the Bronx. And you referenced a judge, Guy Mitchell. I'm very familiar with his career, and I remember him. He was underwhelming back then in the early 90s as a ADA in the Bronx. And he let that guy, first he let that career criminal, a gang member who bludgeoned to death a 69-year-old homeless man, he let him walk. And the district attorney forced him to give him 9 months. And the DA wanted 10 years, appropriately, for murder too. And he gave him 9 months. He gave him a walk. What I feel, what I'm convinced, John, is that the judges and the soft on crime prosecutors, the lenient judges, the soft on crime prosecutors, judges like Mitchell who ignore mountains of evidence, subvert and allow in perjured testimony from eye and ear witnesses, completely ignore as an arbiter of the facts, material facts. They should be outed. They should be crushed. And it's no longer billboards. They should be outed on social media. There should be an avalanche against them. And it should list, when they let a guy out, when they release a prisoner that should be in statutorily, and they release him in 9 months or 9 days, and he goes and he rapes an 11-year-old, or shoots a 7-month-old, or murders an 87-year-old, they should be held their feet to the fire in the public opinion. They should be crucified publicly. What do you think about that? A public outing, a public shaming of these judges and prosecutors who let these animals walk.
Absolutely. And that's why I go back to educating the public on the civics, because I believe all of this is politically motivated and politically driven. Guy Mitchell was appointed by Bill de Blasio. He was reappointed then again by Eric Adams. That not only should Guy Mitchell be outed, but the politicians that appointed him, they're tied. He's tied to them, in my opinion. You put him there. Why would you
Right.
put him there? If you supported the police, why would you put him there? If you supported common sense and public safety, and the same goes for the district attorneys. The same goes for the district attorneys who a lot of them feel like they're social workers rather than prosecutors. They've forgotten their job. They're putting politics ahead of the law. They're putting politics ahead of their oath. And that's another thing when it comes election time. These people should absolutely, and I've done a lot of it myself, and I'm not a big, I'm not, I got a lot of powerful people that don't like the things I say, but nothing I'm saying is a lie. And I'm just putting the facts out there, what it is. And it's the same with the legislation that they're being held to, the discovery law, the bail reform law. People need to understand these have been put in place. The same guy that put these in place is telling you, I'm going to save you. The same guy that cheered for this is telling you, I'm going to save you. It's the politics in New York City that has captured the criminal justice system as a whole. But as far as the public's concerned, based upon the media narrative, they believe it just to be the fault of the New York City Police Department. They believe everything starts and ends with the New York City Police Department. But the criminal justice system really just begins with us. We make the arrest, and then we bring it into the hands of the district attorneys and ultimately into judges and juries. And the criminal justice system in New York City is highly broken, and it needs to be fixed. And the only way we're going to fix that is through the ballot box. But we need an informed, educated public that's non-apathetic, that gets out to that voting booth. And I totally agree with you. It needs to be done on platforms like this. It needs to be done on social media. And we have to stop being afraid to use our voice and to step into our power, because your opinion matters. Your voice matters.
Amen. I couldn't agree more. I think public shaming, incinerate them on social media, no different than the way that they incinerate officers who allegedly have misbehaved. And Eric Duran is the most recent nightmare scenario. But these judges and these prosecutors have gotten a pass for so long, it sickens me. It's despicable. And it really is unforgivable that it's just not out there. They release someone who murders another person a year later, a day later, an hour later. The public has to know that time and time and time and time again. And Duran, what was he supposed to do? I mean, just to wrap us up here, was he supposed to let this convicted felon, this repeat drug dealing felon, just release him into broader society so he could rape a girl, assault someone, shoot someone, rob someone? No. His duty, his sworn duty to the state of New York Constitution was to protect and serve. And he did. He stopped them. The fact that Eric Dupre, the felon, was riding a motorcycle at 40 miles an hour on a 5-foot wide sidewalk was his fault. He hit a tree and he flew off the bike and he busted his head open. You know what? You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And that's the bottom line. So, John, this was amazing. Thank you. You're doing God's work and you're on the right side of the angels. So I salute you, and Finest Unfiltered is amazing. Keep up the amazing work. And folks, before we wrap up, if you haven't already, do me a favor and hit that subscribe or follow button so you don't miss any more of The Batcave with Pat Brosnan. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, all the usual spots. Just search The Batcave with Pat Brosnan and you will find us. And hey, leave a quick review or rating while you're there. It really helps us grow the show so we can keep bringing you the best guests, the special guests like Lieutenant John Macari, and straight talk you won't hear anywhere else. Facts, focus, and forensic precision. Appreciate all the support. You guys make it happen every week. Hope you have an amazing day and stay vigilant at all times. This is Pat Brosnan signing off from the Batcave, 30 feet underground, somewhere in Gotham. Good luck finding me.